your map because I want you to be able to track what goes on here in 27. Okay, y'all ready? Let's do it. When it was decided that we were to sail to Italy, they handed over Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion named Julius. All right, remember this name. Julius is going to play a big role in this whole journey. Paul and the centurion learned to get along pretty well. He was of the imperial regiment, which was a pretty high honor. So when we had boarded a ship of Andromitium, something like that, Andromidium, thank you. All right, always just say it fast and keep moving, all right? People think you're smart, you can keep going. We put to sea, intending to sail to ports along the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of that. So the three of them seem to be Paul's little group, Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke. The next day we put in at Sidon, so we just jumped up the coast a little bit. And Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to receive their care. When we had put out to sea from there, we sailed along the northern coast of Cyprus because the winds were against us. Okay, so on your map, you should see this. You can see Sidon. Now, if you're going to Italy and you're going to Rome, do you go around the northern coast of Cyprus? No, but they did because the winds were against them. Okay, so they could not sail directly west, so they went up around the coast, so they're going to go along the coastline. Okay, everybody following this so far? All right, I want you to just follow this with me, all right, so you can see the intricacy. And this, again, somebody who's done this before, the details that are given here, this is why I would make the argument that Luke was a ship doctor. Because doctors back then were slaves. The owners of the ships would hire slaves or purchase slaves, train them in medicine, and put them on ships so that as they're traveling around, if anybody got sick, stabbed, whatever, they've got somebody on board who could take care of that person. Because Luke gives us so much detail, that's why I would make that argument, but hey, you probably don't care that. Anyway, all right, 5. After sailing through the open sea off Cilicia and Pamphylia, all right, that's Tarsus. You see the word Tarsus up there, right in the corner, just north and west of Antioch. And then Pamphylia is where John Mark bails on us. So we're just sailing along that southern coast of Turkey. All right, we reached Myra. You can see Myra there on your map in Lycia, the province of Lycia. There, the centurion, our centurion friend, found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. Sailing slowly for many days, we came with difficulty as far as Cnidus. All right, everybody see Cnidus? Just kind of come around that corner. You'll see Cnidus. Since the wind did not allow us to approach it, we sailed along the south side of Crete off Salmone. All right, everybody see Crete? It's kind of right in your middle. All right. With yet more difficulty, we sailed along the coast and came to a place called Fair Havens near the city of Lycia. All right. Now, you can look behind me and you can see this is the island of Crete. Okay. Anybody good with Mac mouses? Are you good with Mac mouses? Can you go up there, the far right one? Let's see. I want to zoom in on these far right over here on Fair Havens. So go up there in the sound booth. I want you to see these ports. So this one was called Fair Havens near the city of Lycia. All right. I'm going to keep going. Just zoom in on the right little red thing. Yeah, one of those. All right. By now, much time had passed, and the voyage was already dangerous. It was said that after November, this voyage was impossible. Yeah, back out on that just a hair. All right. Y'all see this? This is Fair Havens. Okay. Yes. You can see. Go up just a little bit, Josh. There you go. No, this is Fair Havens, trust me. This is Crete. This is the island of Crete. All right. It was said that after November, the voyage was impossible. You could not do it. It was sort of the hurricane type weather. Now, what we see here, hold right there, Josh. You see this? So if you get into this port, all right, and you get a strong westerly wind heading to the west, what's going to happen to your boat? You're going to get battered. You need a protective barrier. So when you're open to the sea and the winds can come against you, the waves will come against you, your ship will be destroyed. Okay? So here we go. By now much time had passed and the voyage was already dangerous. Since the fast, Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, was already over, Paul gave his advice. Now, Paul giving advice about nautical matters. Who's listening to Paul? What does Paul do? What's his profession? A tent maker. Hey guys, we got a tent maker on board. And he knows Jewish law. He's got some advice as to whether or not we should sail the Mediterranean. Who's listening to Paul? Okay, so he tells them, men, I can see this voyage is headed toward damage and heavy loss. Now, he probably knew once you hit November, you don't want to go here, all right? And they're getting real close. They're probably October, mid-October, all right? Heavy loss, not only the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion paid attention to the captain of the ship, or the helmsman, and the owner of the ship, rather than to what Paul said. You think? We have a tent maker over here, or we have a navigator, helmsman, captain of the ship, and the owner of the ship, all right? Now, when we talk about this ship holds 276 people, all right? This is not a little dinghy, all right? This is a legitimate big ship, all right? So they listened to him. Verse 12, since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided to set sail from there, hoping somehow to reach Phoenix, a harbor on Crete open to the southwest and northwest, and to winter there. All right, now this is about 50 miles away. Okay, so we don't want to winter there because you see the harbor is open to the east. Okay, it's dangerous. We don't want to stay there. All right, so back out on me, Josh. Keep going. Keep going. All right, see the other red dot? There, we want to make this little trip. Go ahead and zoom in on that one. Oh my goodness, look at that. Guess what happens when the wind comes in from the east? You move your ship. What happens if it comes the other side? You move around. Now what can you do for the winter? There you go. You sit right there. All right? And they could manage this because it had this port on either side, or these harbors on either side. Now you see why they want to do this? All right? So this is that island of Crete. So back out so everybody can see the whole island of Crete. There we go. Whoop, that's a little far. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. All right, that's good, Josh. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your navigating. I'm stuck on my I keep getting stuck on my cord. Anyway, all right. So they want to winter there. So that's the decision. Let's do this. Let's go. 13. When a gentle south wind sprang up. That even sounds pleasant. A gentle south wind sprung up. They thought they had achieved their purpose. They weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete, but not long afterward, a fierce wind called the northeaster rushed down from the island. Since the ship was caught and was unable to head into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along. After running under the shelter of a little island called Cauda, all right, you can see Cauda just south of Phoenix, all right, we were barely able to get control of the skiff. After hoisting it up, they used ropes and tackle and girded the ship. Then, fearing they would run aground on the Syrtis, okay? Now, on your map, right above where it says Africa, you can write in Syrtis. These were huge sandbars. Sandbars that would create whirlpools, sandbars that would create all sorts of havoc. You do not want to get anywhere near those things. You get anywhere near those things, you are done. You are stuck in the middle of the Mediterranean, and you ain't getting off that sandbar, all right? Syrtis would be here. Okay, right above where it says Africa. Okay, right off the Libyan coast. So they're being blown, just blown, all right? I mean, nothing, hurricane force wind coming at you off the island. This is why they say don't sail in November, all right? This is what would get you, all right? Okay, then fearing we would run by the storm, they began to jettison the cargo the next day, all right? So we dropped the drift anchor, did the best we can with that. That didn't work. We throw the cargo over the next day. On the third day, they threw the ship's gear overboard with their own hands. What's left? What's left on the boat? Not much. There ain't much left. They've thrown pretty much overboard, all right? For many days, neither the sun nor stars appeared, all right? Why is that a problem? Navigation, exactly, all right? And the severe storm kept raging. Finally, all hope that we would be saved was disappearing. Since many were going without food, Paul stood up among them and said, "You men should have followed my advice." Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. All right, no, everybody loves that guy, right? The I told you so guy. The I told you so tent maker. Yeah. Yeah, it's not like he is anything. All right, you should have followed my advice not to sail from Crete and sustain this damage and loss. Thank you, Paul. Next time we'll listen to you. Now I urge you to take courage, because there will be no loss of any of your lives, but only of the ship. For this night, an angel of God I belong to and serve stood by me and said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And look, God has graciously given you all those who are sailing with you. Therefore, take courage, men, because I believe God that it will be just the way it was told to me. However, we must run aground on a certain island." Now, how do you take this? If you're one of the 275 people on board and Paul, the tent maker, Jewish rabbi, is telling you, "Hey, don't worry, everything's going to be okay." You're in the middle of a hurricane. In the ocean, you've got no drift anchor, you've got no cargo, and you've got no gear. And you're drifting around in the sea, and tent maker guy just said, "You should have done what I told you. And the God that I serve has told me that we're going to make it fine. So it's all good." We're going to run it aground. Yeah. It's going to be fine. How are you feeling? He was right about not going. I think you would be a little intrigued. Does this guy really know something? Now, hope was disappearing. It hasn't disappeared yet. Yeah. Is it a moment where you go, "Well, it's not like anything else has worked"? Do you really take courage in that, though? Do you go, punch your buddy, "We're going to be okay"? Whew. Or are you going, "This guy's nuts, but what else we got to lose"? I mean, they all think they're going to run around on the Syrtis. All right, and when you run around, like I said, it's hundreds of miles off the coast. So imagine being stuck on a sandbar in the Mediterranean, 100 miles off the coast. No one's going to come find you. No one's going to come help you. No, so to me, it's kind of we got nothing to lose. I mean, it's not like we're going to do anything else. All right. 27. When the 14th night came, 2 weeks later, you with me? Have you ever been there for 2 weeks, floating around in the ocean? All right, we were drifting in the Adriatic Sea. Now, in between what was Yugoslavia, Croatia, all that stuff, and Italy. So if you go directly up from the heel of the boot, that is now the Adriatic Sea, okay? Below that is called the Ionian Sea today, all right? In this time, they called all of it the Adriatic Sea. Everybody okay with that? So I don't want you to get too confused. They weren't up into like Croatia, Yugoslavia, all that stuff, okay? They were in what we would call the Ionian Sea today, which literally is basically, if you draw a line between Athens and Sicily, that whole area is Ionian Sea, okay? So that's just a difference in what we call it and they called it. And in the middle of the night, the sailors thought they were approaching land. They took a sounding and found it to be 120 feet deep, okay? What that means is they took a long rope with a bunch of knots on it with a weight on the bottom. They dropped this into the ocean. When it hit bottom and the slack started to pull, they pull it up until they have no slack anymore. And they go, okay, that's how deep it is, okay? So 120 feet deep. When they sailed a little farther, sounded again, they found it to be 90 feet deep, all right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that a good thing? It depends. It depends. All that means is you're getting shallower. That may be a good thing. That may be a bad thing. Okay. Then, fearing we might run aground on some rocky place, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight to come. All right. Just let the sun come up so we can at least see where we are. Can you imagine being shipwrecked on a sandbar or crashing into rocks in the middle of the Mediterranean at night? All right, you want daylight. Some sailors tried to escape from the ship. They're like, this is not going to end well. We're out of here. They had let down the skiff into the sea, pretending they were going to put out anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion, remember I said they started to have this little bit of relationship. Started with here's my advice, don't sail from Crete. Whatever, Paul, thank you. All right, then take courage. We're all going to be okay. Now Paul comes to him and goes, hey, if those guys leave the ship, we're all going to die. All right? Now, is that a consequence of them leaving the ship? I mean, if 4 guys leave the ship, does everybody, the other 272, die because they left the ship? There's something going on here that's not bigger than just facts, right? There's something here. So, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. How does the centurion handle this advice from Paul? He goes, all right, Paul, we're still alive. You did tell us we would still live. We are still alive. He urged them all to take food, saying, today is the 14th day, and you've been waiting and going without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for this has to do with your survival, since none of you will lose a hair from your heads. After he said these things, how did they feel? Go ahead and eat. We're going to be okay. Anybody buying into the Paul knows what he's talking about yet? Yeah, I'm a little hungry, so if he's going to say it, and the centurion goes, yeah, y'all go ahead. All right? You're going to eat. At least you'll die full. I mean, so after he said these things and had taken some bread, he gave thanks to God in the presence of all of them. Love that part. In the presence of all of them. What do you think they all did? Did they join in with his blessing? They're still alive. All right, and he broke it and began to eat. They all became encouraged and took food themselves. In all, there were 276 of us on the ship. When they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing the grain overboard into the sea. So what's left on the boat? Literally people. That's all that's left. 39, when daybreak came, they did not recognize the land, but sighted a bay with a beach. Is that good or bad? A bay? A bay is just sort of an inlet, all right? And it's got a beach, which means what? Drive right on up there, all right? I love that part. That should be my life verse right there, all right? Anything with a beach, I'm good with, all right? Okay, they planned to run the ship ashore if they could. After casting off the anchors, and it's interesting, I just heard this today, that they went and did an excavation of the coast where they believed this took place, and they found 4 anchors from the first century. And so after casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea at the same time. And who knows if they're that boat or not. I mean, but they did find 4 anchors anyway. At the same time, loosening the ropes that held the rudder, they hoisted the foresail to the wind and headed for the beach. Hoisted the foresail means what? That big spinnaker thing, whatever was left. We held on and just hold on, just let that thing blow us right in there. 41, but they struck a sandbar and ran the ship aground. The bow jammed fast and remained immovable while the stern began to break up by the pounding of the waves. So the front of your boat is stuck, and the back of your boat is just waves, just pounding, and it's starting to break up and fall apart. Okay. The soldier's plan was to kill the prisoners so that no one could swim away and escape. But the centurion, who's the centurion? Julius? How are he and Paul doing? Yeah, they're pretty good at this point. Kept them from carrying out their plan because he wanted to save Paul. So he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land, the rest to follow, some on planks, some on debris from the ship. In this way, everyone safely reached the shore. So Paul was right. How are they feeling about Paul? The tent maker Jewish rabbi. You're like, wow. Do any of them go, hey, let's go sailing again, but Paul, you got to come with us? I'm like, that's that moment where you go, I don't know if he's good luck or bad luck, because the whole trip has been a mess. All right, once ashore, we learned that the island was called Malta. The local people showed us extraordinary kindness, for they lit a fire and took us all in, since it was raining and cold. How big was this fire? 276 people gathered around a bonfire. That's a big fire right there, all right? I don't know if they had everybody around it, but anyway. 3, as Paul gathered a bundle of brushwood and put it on a fire, a poisonous viper, I don't know if your text just says viper, but a poisonous viper. And did y'all pick up Malta? Y'all saw that on your little map thing? All right, anyway. A poisonous viper came out because of the heat and fastened itself to his hand. Interesting point, there are no longer any poisonous vipers on the island of Malta. They're not there anymore, for whatever reason, all right? So fastened on his hand. When the local people saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, this man is probably a murderer, and though he has escaped the sea, justice does not allow him to live. So they're all watching him, because what are they expecting? They're just waiting on him to die, because that viper got him, and we know what happens when that viper gets you, all right? You die. However, he shook the creature off into the fire and suffered no harm. They expected that he would swell up or suddenly drop dead, but after they waited a long time, which is kind of sad, I have nothing better to do. Let's just wait for a long time and watch to see if he falls down dead or swells up. Saw nothing unusual happen to him. They changed their mind and said he was a god. What happened last time people thought Paul was a god? He got stoned to death, all right? So in the back of your mind, Paul is wondering, is this a good thing that they think I'm a god or a bad thing? Because it didn't work out so well last time. 7, now in the area around that place was an estate belonging to the leading man of the island named Publius, who welcomed us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. Publius' father was in bed suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went to him, and praying and laying his hands on him, he healed him. After this, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. So they heaped many honors on us, and we sailed. And when we sailed, they gave us what we needed. All right? Isn't it cool how Paul always has what he needs? I'm guessing they got another ship. That would kind of make sense. So after 3 months, here it is. We set sail in an Alexandrian ship that had wintered at the island, with the twin brothers as its figurehead. Who are the twin brothers? Anybody know? It's the constellation Gemini and the 2 brothers. Anyone? Thank you, Castor and Pollux, who were the gods of the wind and the waves. Right? Maybe you should have taken that ship the first time around. So maybe it worked out better for him. 12, putting in at Syracuse. You can just go north from Malta. You see the island of Sicily. And on that east coast, you see Syracuse. In case you didn't know, there was another Syracuse out there in the world, and not the one in New York. Stayed there for 3 days. From there, after making a circuit along the coast, we reached Rhegium. After 1 day, a south wind sprang up, and the second day we came to Puteoli. Does that sound Italian or what? Yeah. That's a good pizza in Puteoli. 14, there we found believers. Is that a good thing? Yeah. Some people who are followers of Christ. Wow, this is cool. And we're invited to stay with them for 7 days. How did he get away from the ship and away from the centurion? Julius let him go. What's happened to the relationship here? Is there trust there? Yeah, isn't it cool how Paul is just being faithful to who he is and what he's been called to? And this Roman centurion, Julius, just continues to trust him. Oh, certainly. Well, you got to remember, he's been in prison in Caesarea for 2 years. And prior to him returning on his 3rd missionary journey, Phoebe takes the letter to the Roman church. So the Roman church would have had the letter Romans for at least 2 years, 2, maybe 3 years. Priscilla and Aquila are there. In fact, in Paul's letter, he says, greet Priscilla and Aquila, who are there. So their influence. Yeah, their influence would have certainly have spread. Okay. Yeah, and if you go watch the movie, the Apostle Paul, the movie, you see there's a church there. And you can see it's there in Rome, but I'm sure it has spread somewhat. So anyway. And you can see Puteoli is just south on just off the Appian Way. So it wouldn't be that strange. All right. And so we came to Rome. Now the believers from there had heard the news about us and had come to meet us as far as the Forum of Appius and the Three Taverns. All right. So bar hopping. All right. He said, let's meet up at the bar. All right. So, and this is about 40 miles south of Rome. All right. When Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. When we entered Rome, Paul was permitted to stay by himself with the soldier who guarded him. All right. Now I've told you he is there in Rome. On this trip, he is not in a prison cell. He gets to have his own house. This would be fairly normal. Okay. But he would have a soldier attached to him, literally probably like an 18-inch chain is what they say, that one to the wrist and one attached to a Praetorian guard. Okay, who would just keep watch over him. So as Paul is in this house, he comes along and he sits there waiting for his trial. And what does he do while he does that? He sits down and writes a letter to the Ephesian church. Right? Probably he dictates a letter, right, with the Praetorian guard attached to him. He sits down and he writes the Philippian letter. He writes the Colossian letter and possibly even the Philemon letter. Right? He writes all these letters while he's there with the Praetorian guard attached to him. Now, here's what I want you to do. Come over here to Philippians, the letter to the Philippians. I want you to see what happens when you remain faithful. He's already got the centurion who now trusts him pretty much with just about anything at this point, I would guess. In the letter to the Philippians, Philippians 1, verse 12, Paul's writing to this church, this amazing church with Lydia, the slave girl, and the jailer, all right? He says, now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me being in prison, has actually resulted in the advance of the gospel. So me being in prison has had an effect on the advancement of the gospel. The gospel is spreading while I'm here in prison, right? And I'm not leaving my house, really, but it's having this effect. So that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard, literally the Praetorian. Who's attached to him? A Praetorian. Is it the same one all the time? No, they go in shifts. So as Paul is dictating these letters, he's got a Praetorian guard attached to him. Anything in Ephesians that might catch the ear of a Praetorian guard that is like, wow, that's good news. Anything? I mean, we've preached through it for like 20 weeks now. Y'all should say, yes, there's such awesome stuff. And the grace of God just jumps out at you every time. And so they're hearing this, and what are they doing? They're going back to the headquarters, and what are they doing? You won't believe what he said today. You won't believe what I heard today. I'm going tomorrow. Who wants to go the next day? Do you see how this? So he writes this to the Philippian church. Later on, he goes, it's so cool. They're listening to me as I'm dictating these letters, and they're going back, and it's advancing the gospel right here in the midst of the whole Praetorian guard. All right, just a cool thing when you cross over and see that in real time. 17. After 3 days, he called together the leaders of the Jews. All right, now this is an interesting little mix here. All right, he's been there for 3 days. He calls together the leader of the Jews. Why is he in Rome? Yeah, the Jews threw all these charges at him. What were they? What were the charges? What was he being accused of? Remember when James has the conversation? He says, they think you're doing this. Yeah, well, that was the accusation, but what does James say? James says they think you're disregarding Moses. They think you're doing all these things against the law, all right? Later on, the Asian or Ephesian Jews said, hey, we think you brought Trophimus in, all right? Which was, again, the big oops, which we're still in, all right? So 3 days, he calls together the leaders of the Jews. When they had gathered, he said to them, brothers, although I have done nothing against our people or the customs of our ancestors, I was delivered as a prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans. After they examined me, they wanted to release me, since I had not committed a capital offense. Because the Jews objected, I was compelled to appeal to Caesar. It was not as though I had any accusation against my nation. For this reason, I've asked to see you and speak to you. In fact, it is for the hope of Israel that I'm wearing this chain. All right? It's interesting that he doesn't say chains here. We'll see this on Sunday with the last part of the Ephesians letter as well. All right? Then they said to him, we haven't received any letters about you from Judea. So what are the leaders of the Jews? What do they know about Paul? We don't know anything, Paul. Nothing's come to us. No one sent a letter. And when Paul appeals to Caesar, they know this. They know he's going to go to Rome. Wouldn't they have written letters? These are the accusations you should have against them. But it never happened. They just never sent them. All right? It's interesting. Really interesting. None of the brothers has come and reported or spoken anything evil about you. 22. But we would like to hear from you what you think. For concerning this sect, all right, he's talking about Christians, we are aware that it is spoken against everywhere. Isn't it fun being a Christian? Everybody in the whole Greco-Roman world going, these guys are bad news. These guys are bad news. Why? Because that's the way it's always going to be. It's just the way it's going to be. Because the ruler of this world is going to turn hearts against the truth. So we talked about Sunday. The ruler of this world is going to do this. You will have tribulation in this world. You will have persecution in this world. It will be difficult, all right? And so that's what they're reporting, just as Jesus said in John 6. 23, after arranging a day with him, because they said, hey, we would like to hear about all this stuff. We want to hear. After arranging a day with him, many came to him at his lodging, his house. From dawn to dusk, he expounded and witnessed about the kingdom of God. He tried to persuade them concerning Jesus from both the law of Moses and the prophets. Has he ever done this before? Everywhere, right? He goes into a town, and where does he go? He goes to the synagogue, tries to persuade his brothers. Again, this is Romans 9. I wish that myself could be accursed if we could trade places. I would accept being cursed of God if my nation would come to know Christ. All right? That's his heart. That's why he keeps going doing this thing. So he tried to persuade them concerning Jesus from both the law of Moses and the prophets. Some were persuaded by what he said, but others did not believe. Disagreeing among themselves, they began to leave after Paul made one statement. The Holy Spirit correctly spoke through the prophet Isaiah to your ancestors when he said, and this is his last words that made them want to leave. And this is Isaiah 6, 9, and 10. Go to these people and say, you will listen and listen, yet never understand. And you will look and look, yet never perceive. For the hearts of these people have grown callous. Their ears are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and be converted, and I would heal them. Therefore let it be known to you that this saving work of God has been sent to the Gentiles. They will listen. And this is when they walked away. Again, they hear the word Gentiles, they walk away. All right? Now, if you read that text and you understand this, if you kind of dial it back a little bit, you got to remember Romans was written probably 5-6 years earlier. Paul describes exactly this in Romans 9, 10, 11. All right? He says there will come a partial hardening of the hearts of the Jewish people. Right? Now, for Gentile folks like ourselves, like most of us, I'm guessing most of us are Gentiles, not Jewish people. That's awesome. You know why? Because what if there hadn't been a partial hardening of the Jewish people and it remained there in Jerusalem and everybody in Jerusalem and Judea worshiped Christ and all the Jewish people celebrated Christ and we were sitting on the outside looking in going, I wish we could do that. We'd still be there. But because of this partial hardening that Paul talks about in Romans, again, written 5, 6, 7 years earlier. Because of this, the message of the gospel spread out everywhere because the persecution took place in Jerusalem, so it scattered everybody out. So the message went out because of that partial hardening of the Jewish people. Yep, the invited guests. Mm-hmm. The anybody's and the everybody's. Exactly. Hey, throw me in there too. Some guy named Bubba sitting next to Jamie. So, okay, say that one more time. I want to make sure I heard you. Yeah. Yeah, yes, and the question was if, as soon as he does say the word Gentiles, everybody kind of is. And you should understand, this was the understanding of the Jewish people. You didn't cross over. You don't. We are the chosen people, right? This is why everybody's so shocked when Peter is talking to Cornelius, and all of a sudden the Holy Spirit comes down on him, and he's like, "What just happened? Where did that come from?" Because it would be so foreign because they were the chosen people. The kingdom was for them. I mean, what did the disciples believe? Jesus, are you setting up your kingdom now so we can overthrow the Romans because they're the bad guys? And Jesus sitting there going, they're not the bad guys, they're just guys. And they can be part of my kingdom. So it shows the understanding and the mindset of the first century Jewish person that the Gentiles are not included. This must be heresy. So that's why they're walking away. This is heresy because there's no way the Gentiles are involved in this, which they probably should have gone back and read Isaiah again because it clearly states that the Gentiles will be brought in. So anyway, all right. 29. After he said these things, the Jews departed while engaging in a prolonged debate among themselves. Then he stayed 2 whole years in his own rented house, and he welcomed all who visited him, proclaiming the kingdom of God and teaching the things concerning the Lord Jesus Christ with full boldness and without hindrance. The end. I don't know. It's in brackets. It's probably. Yeah. No, I believe you. It's just something that they just left out. So generally, what happens is they find these texts, and maybe some of the newer transcripts that they found don't have this particular verse in it, and so sometimes they'll completely leave it out. Mine is in brackets. Some of yours may be in brackets. Verse 29. Nothing. You don't even have 29. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, they leave it out simply because they don't want to just change the numbers. Verse 29 says, after he said these things, the Jews departed while engaging in a prolonged debate among themselves. I mean, it's not like, and then this major event happened. It's like, yeah, we already said they left, and so they left again. So, it can be a scribe error. I hate to say a scribe error, but in some manuscripts, they wrote that explanation again, some they didn't. And so sometimes, like I said, sometimes they'll bracket it off anyway, just so they don't mess up the numbering from that point on. No big, don't lose sleep over that one. Lose sleep over people preaching the end of Mark, which is like 12 verses. That's not Mark. So anyway, now here's the thing. So we end. So is that the end of the story? No, because he hasn't faced Caesar yet, right? And he's supposed to face Caesar, all right? What we believe, and you can pick up a little bit of this from the first letter to Timothy, and the letter to Titus for sure, is that he is released and does my guess, and I'm almost positive about this, he goes to Philippi, all right? Gets resourced once more, goes, Nicopolis is one of the cities he says, come here, and then he is rearrested and brought back to Rome. This is when he writes 2 Timothy. and says, "Come, Timothy, come to me as soon as you can, because everyone else has left me." Um, and so you get this. And this, if you watch the movie, The Apostle Paul, the movie that was just released, 3 years ago or 4 years ago? So crazy. The fraternity brother of mine was one of the executive producers. So I always like to throw this in there. The action of that movie is when he's rearrested. All right, it is not, the Apostle Paul movie is not in the context of Acts at all. It's in that secondary arrest, where he's arrested for the second time, writes Timothy the letter, Luke's with him, and then he is, according to Fox's Book of Martyrs, not according to the Bible, but according to Fox's Book of Martyrs, he is beheaded outside of Rome, somewhere in the mid-60 AD. So, by Caesar. Well, the Caesar's a big name, so yeah, one of the Caesars. So, and I can't remember if it was Nero. I don't think it was Nero. I think it was the one right after Nero. What'd you ask? No. He says, only Luke is left with me. You can read 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy is the last letter that he wrote, and he evidently wrote that from what's called the Mamertine prison, because he talks about being in chains. So it's a very, he knows he's going to die in 2 Timothy. It's just a matter of time. So he's saying, hurry, come to me soon. And he's really in need. Everybody's abandoned him at this point because the persecution of the Christians has become so harsh, which is why he was beheaded, because of the persecution. No, we can kind of pick up bits and pieces, like I said, from 1 Timothy and from Titus. We get these details of this post-Acts little missionary journey thing. And then we gather that he's been rearrested back in Rome from the second letter to Timothy. And then he's beheaded shortly thereafter. So, all right. So you all know Acts now, backwards and forwards. So when I stand up on Sunday and say, okay, who can cite for me the 3 missionary journeys? Boom, 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 boom. You can do it, right? Know the stories. Know the stories. Hey, you have absolutely nothing better to do with your free time than to learn the book of Acts. You don't. And to be able to know it and decide it and to go, wow, that's like Paul when he was in Philippi, and that was like Paul when he was at Centuria. And man, I wonder what Phoebe was like, that she got the honor of taking the letter to the Romans. That's what we need to be thinking about. So, like I said, you got nothing better to do. I mean, you can read the whole thing of Acts in maybe 2 hours if you're good. So, all right, any questions, any thoughts? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I talk about that partial hardening. It really is it's on the border of a supernatural hardening of the hearts of the Jewish people. It doesn't make sense that they don't believe. It's literally like they have these blinders on, this partial hardening, that they're just blinded to it. And there are whole chapters in the Old Testament that you go, don't you see Jesus? I mean, Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, these things. And they go, I've never read that before. Never read that one before. Daniel 9, no, never read that before. And it is changing, and it will. With the end times, we're going to see that it come full circle. And there will be, we believe there will be a great revival of the Jewish people in the end times. So that's kind of what's implied with 144,000, but I don't want to go there, because we'll get to that soon enough. All right, so over the summer, we're going to take next week off, all right? And then we will come back. And so the backside of, or the rest of May, and then June and July, as much as we're in town and all that stuff, we'll go through the Revelation, all right? And, oh, don't get too excited. Acts is like reading Dr. Seuss, Mother Goose, compared to what in the world are you talking about in Revelation? So, but we'll try and incorporate Daniel with that. We'll incorporate the Thessalonian letters, which are big in that, and so we'll get the whole spectrum of the Revelation and try and incorporate as much as we can. I'm going to try and keep my personal views out of it as much as I can, but I probably won't. So, yeah, even when I should. Thanks, Sugar Mama. All right. All right. Thank you guys for coming. This is important. This is important that we do this as a church. I would ask you, just ask you to tell other people, hey, you need to be here on Wednesday night. It's a whole nother level, and it's a good, relaxed environment. If you've been around me for 5 minutes on these Wednesday nights, this is me. I wear shorts. I don't wear shoes most of the time. I know, it's gross. And I sit and I don't walk around, and I just talk through the text and answer any questions we have. So encourage people to come. I mean, to me, there's no reason why we have a fourth of the people that we have on Sunday morning. But thank you. Thank you for being disciples. All right? And that's what this means. This is what it looks like to be a disciple. Not with somebody talking to you, when you respond with questions and thoughts and all this stuff, okay? That's what it means to be discipled, okay? All right, let me pray for you, and we'll go. Father, I thank you. Thank you for each and every person you've brought into this room as we've studied through this beautiful text. Father, I thank you for Luke. I thank you for just his vision and the Holy Spirit's inspiration that led him to write down all this beautiful information that we have. Father, may we continue to be discipled with this book. We thank you that you have preserved it for us for these thousands of years so that we can learn and grow and see your hand and see the beauty of your work. I thank you for Paul. I thank you for Peter, for John, for James, for Philip, for Apollos, for Timothy, for Barnabas, for Silas, for all these beautiful people who turned to you, like Lydia and the jailer and the slave girl. And thank you for the crowds at Mars Hill. And thank you for Aquila and Priscilla. Thank you for the bad boy Titus that encouraged Paul so much. Thank you for all these saints, these beautiful saints that led the way so that I could know you and understand and receive the salvation that you've given me. So again, I thank you for this group. I thank you for each person you brought here. I pray again that you would just give them back this time that they have spent learning, growing, and understanding more about you and your character. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.